G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to fix the game in patch 1.91. Well, maybe not. But what we're going to do is discuss what, in my opinion, we should be doing with the entire movement, I suppose. So for those of you who don't know, the Orange Doom uploaded a video a few weeks ago that basically went through the entire game and talked about how a lot of these changes, or a lot of the ways that Gaijin goes about doing things, has left long-standing players with a feeling of perhaps disenfranchisement. I guess a feeling of perhaps dissatisfaction is the better way to put it. And a lot of these players just seem to leave because they just get sick of the constant small things. They get sick of sparks. They get sick of the airfield AA not being consistent. They get sick of ghost shells. They get sick of, every little thing that they perceive to be wrong with the game. And a lot of these things, in some cases, are issues. What is the real kicker for me is that when people tend to do this, they tend to up and leave, it tends to leave a vacuum. Not only does it tend to leave a skill vacuum where you've got players that have come into the game, have gotten better, are starting to get to the point where maybe in their squadron they're teaching people to get better at the game, and then they just leave. So you have a decent player, perhaps they're just average, but perhaps they're decent. They've left the game, and then there's no one else to sort of pick up that mantle. Everyone's got to sort of find it themselves. You also get a obvious increase in queue time. This is obviously not a great thing. So what we want to do is we would like to, as a community, get together the long-standing players and keep them in the game, keep them playing. Because, let's face it, this game needs players. And the way you can very, very easily, 1, keep your current players, 2, bring new players, and most importantly, bring back the older players, is to either have a sense of nostalgia, where perhaps there is a tier of the game that is revived, or you could also have just an overall more balanced, better rounded, more polished War Thunder. Now, this is very hard to achieve, and in everyone's eyes, there is a different version of a completely polished War Thunder. That is the major problem. I did ask my Twitter following a couple of months ago, I believe it was, what they thought the biggest issue in War Thunder was. And for me, it was something like maps. For me, the biggest issue is map design and the design of and the placement of spawns. For other people, it was quite literally the battle rating of certain vehicles. For some people, it was repair costs. For some people, it was ghost shells. Now, everyone has quite literally a different opinion. And to some extent, this is a good thing. This means that we get an all-rounded understanding of what we need to address. But if we're going to ask Gaijin to take a specific look at a certain issue, then we need to pick an issue, essentially. We need to pick maybe 1 or 2 issues, and we need to go with them. That's the important thing. We need to be a united front, if you will. A group of people that wants to achieve the same goal, the exact same goal. Nothing more, nothing less for now. I suggest that our biggest issues in the game currently are indeed the map design and servers. I'll start with map design. For a start, in Gaijin, generally, the maps are okay. You have some decent maps like Poland, Eastern Europe, Ash River. You have Maginot is starting to mature. You have Sands of Sinai, which is starting to mature. These are some really nice maps. You have Fulda, which is also starting to mature. I do have issue with some of the newer maps. I have issue with some of the older maps. And I have issue mostly with the placement of the spawns and the dead space in between the spawns, the caps, and the enemy spawn. What do I mean by dead space? Essentially, if you were to go onto a map that is poorly made, like Vietnam or surroundings of Volokholamsk, you would find either a 10-minute drive into the battle, or you would find a spot, or several spots for that matter, that no one goes through. No one uses these spots. And it's not because they're wide out in the open. It's just that there is no tactical use for them. They are not necessary to win the battle. No one needs to go there to win. And in fact, if you go there, you're most likely to be shot by someone else who has just naturally wandered through. That makes for really poor gameplay. A map like Normandy, for example, is really strong when it comes to gameplay. Because what you have is you have a tactical hill on the C cap, you have the town, you have the A cap, the church, and that has the rings of road on the north side. You also have the main road, you have the monument, you have the beaches, you have certain areas to counterplay, and you have every spot on the map is of tactical importance. Every single spot on the map. There is not one spot that you could not be shooting someone from, or that you could not be denying a position from, which is extremely important in War Thunder. You have decent placement of spawns. They're not able to be shot at right off the bat. It's difficult to get towards them. You have to push through lines of enemies, or you have to push through a town full of enemies, or alternatively, you have to flank so wide that it's going to take a while, and it's also going to not really be that fruitful, because if you're going to go and camp the cliff side or the one side of the spawn, you essentially have to drive all the way around the town, and then you have to sit in an open field. Good luck. A map like Normandy is extremely well made in terms of its tactics and in terms of its gameplay. However, I have heard a lot of requests from the community that have asked for larger maps. And Gaijin has in fact given us larger maps, but the map quality has been so abysmal that the dead spaces like Vietnam, there are whole towns, there are whole villages that are just tactical dead spaces. No one goes there because no one needs to go there. They're tactically irrelevant. They have no use at winning the game. And so whilst they might be very beautiful, whilst they may be extremely good to look at, they're tactically irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. They're useless. And so what needs to be done is they need to be reworked. I would suggest the main issue that we focus with maps is the maps should be balanced for each team. The maps should have as little tactical dead space as possible. And the spawn placement should be in a position where that the enemies cannot shoot each other from spawn, but at the same time, they should avoid the ability to just go out, all out, flank, and spawn camp. A map like Italy has a very, very simple fix. What you do is you take the spawns that are running east to west, and instead you tip it and turn it north to south. This is an extremely straightforward solution. And to combat spawn camping, what you could do is you could actually physically remove sections of the town so that you have an A sector, a B sector, and a C sector where you have an open space in which to cross. And maybe this can be covered by a couple of hills rather than just flat open ground. But you have some relevance to each town for a start. And second of all, you also have the preventation, or you prevent essentially the ability for someone to drive all the way through the town, sit in the town, and spawn camp people off the town without taking all the caps, or without crossing a potentially hazardous sector of the map. I think just small changes like this is what's going to bring the player base back. If you constantly get Italy, which is affectionately called Shitily because it is so broad and kind of rubbish, to be honest. Maps like Alaska, which have too many trees, if you just removed half the trees, it would be perfect because they're all at eye level. They're all at camera level, and it is extremely frustrating to see. I think having discussions, and civil discussions, please, not going to Reddit, giving a Gaijin employee a mental breakdown, and then making them quit their position. That's not on. That is absolutely not on. And I'm absolutely disgusted to see that that's actually happened. It needs to stop. You can't be fucking harassing Gaijin employees. It doesn't work that way. You need to talk to them like a civil human being. It's just, it's beyond me how this stuff happens. But nonetheless, it has happened, and now we have to deal with the consequences, which is less communication from Gaijin. This is something that I've been trying to rebuild slowly with other employees of Gaijin, and it's starting to work. We're starting to get a little bit of conversation that is civil and that is reasonable, and I think most Gaijin employees are quite intelligent. Perhaps some of the management isn't as strong as it should be, and this is because I have no idea. But what we can do is we can have discussions. We can have civil discussions, and on the forums, we can ease off the fix 1.91, because let's face it, patch 1.91 is probably set in stone by now. Who knows? British helicopters, maybe submarines, who knows? And honestly, I don't really care until I see a dev blog. But what we need to start focusing on is a couple of straightforward, simple things that we can fix. Or we can ask, maybe, why is this a thing? Why is this the way it is? One thing that I would also like to be addressed is servers. Now, for those of you who don't know, we have 4 different playable servers, and you can play on all of them. You can select all 4. US, EU, RU, and Southeast Asian. Now, the Southeast Asian server is located in Japan, which is great for Japanese. Great if you're, I guess, anywhere around that area. But if you're anywhere else, it's not that great. So, for example, if you're an Australian like me, your internet will route through, I believe, New Zealand, and then Hawaii, and then the east coast of the United States. Then it will route off to EU and etc. But if you were to go and connect to a server in in Japan, it would route through Hawaii, which gives me 200 and something ping. Anyway, for the Japanese, it'd be great. And I assume that because of the large sim community in Japan, the Southeast Asian server is positioned quite nicely. But at the same time, we have quite a sizable Australian and New Zealand community as well. So what I would suggest is that the Southeast Asian server is actually moved to Hawaii and is called the West US server or something like that. Because at that point, then we actually have a decent server for everyone. Alternatively, you could add an OCE server, but this is a smaller problem. One of the things that I would definitely like to touch on is, in general, Gaijin's netcode has had a long-standing problem. A lot of the issues with ghost shells can approximately be explained with some sort of server latency. There are several videos floating around on the internet from about 2015 of shells, or tanks rather, with their turrets not facing you at all, firing and killing you. And this is because of a long-standing server issue. I don't understand why this is a thing. I'm not a coder. I haven't seen Gaijin's code either, so I have no idea how this is a problem. I have no idea how to fix it. But I think issues like these could perhaps be addressed with a good look at the netcode. Another thing that Gaijin could possibly do is increase the server quality. As I understand it, Gaijin uses older servers which aren't quite as efficient, and at top tier, you seem to get lackluster performance, particularly with short gun time, quick rates of fire, higher velocity guns, higher turret traverses, greater speeds, greater engine power, and obviously a need for more complex calculations with DART and ERA, as well as radar. I think what could be done is higher tier gameplay could be put on a higher tick server. Alternatively, if Gaijin doesn't want to pay for a large space of higher tick or higher quality servers, that's fine. I can completely understand that, because at the end of the day, it's a business and it needs to be run at a profit. Otherwise, it goes bankrupt. But I think simple things like perhaps putting all gameplay, I guess, from 8.0 and above onto a 60 tick server or a higher tick server. Maybe it doesn't have to be 60 tick. Maybe it can be anything. Just higher quality. And I think this would resolve a few of the issues with what some of the players might be experiencing. And I think this is an overall well-rounded solution. Right now in the game, we currently have a massive movement that is basically saying we want the game fixed. Now, obviously, game fixed is different for everyone. What we have to do is we have to take two issues that are universal across the player base and address them so that everyone can get behind them, so that we can have some form of unity and something that Gaijin can actually concretely work towards to address. At the very least, state why this is a thing. And I would be happy if Gaijin said, we don't want to do this because of this particular issue that we ran into coding. And I would say, you know what, that's fine. That's fine. I'm happy to make that concession or to understand why you might not want to do this. But, these two issues I think are universal. These two issues I think are prominent in the game. And I think if we have a good look at what the game has done so far, we could come up with a solution. Especially Gaijin, they're quite intelligent people. I think the entire Fix 1.91 does speak to a bigger picture. It basically, for me, states that the War Thunder player base does like new shiny toys, and there's no doubt about that. But what we would really love to see, especially the long-standing players, is maybe not necessarily an entire patch of bug fixes, maybe not necessarily an Operation Health, but we would like to see some issues that are long-standing with the game addressed. We would like to see perhaps an explanation as to why they're a thing, and perhaps we would like to propose some changes. Obviously, if you want to be civil, I would suggest not spamming fix the game in 1.91 in chats like the forums. Gaijin is now very aware that we would rather have them devote dev time to readjusting things. And obviously, each member of Gaijin, or each employee rather, works on a specific thing. The way they work is they have a separate department for flight models, they have a separate department for maps, they have a separate department for balancing, and essentially every little man goes and does his own thing. At the end of the day, this is this is the way they work, and if we want Gaijin to, say, dedicate resources to that, then, that's what they're going to... They can't just up and do it. It doesn't work that way. The guy who does flight models can't suddenly be addressing battle ratings, because that's not what his job description is. That's not what he's paid for. What needs to be done, I think there are things that each employee could potentially do. Someone who makes maps could address the maps. Someone who has a look at, for example, vehicle models can have a look at bomber cockpits. These are things that are long-standing, that the player base has always asked for. Granted, it's not a big money maker. It's not a big issue for Gaijin as such, because no one plays bombers, and there isn't really a role for bombers in War Thunder. I've already made several videos on that. You can go and check them out and understand exactly what I mean. But for the most part, there are certain little things that a lot of the player base finds issue with. And by taking these two, what we can do is we can start to, one, work as a community together, united, not being arseholes to each other, being civil, please. And also looking to talk to Gaijin and re-establish these connections. I would also ask the player base to refrain from being toxic, quite frankly, towards Gaijin employees. That's just not on. I'm sorry, that is just not on. These guys are, at the end of the day, the hand that feeds us. These people need to be respected, and if we're going to establish a working relationship with Gaijin employees again, after several communities in the War Thunder sphere ruined it, what we need to do is we need to calm down. We need to take a step back. We need to look at ourselves. Screaming on the internet about a game, and whilst it is important to most people, it is, at the end of the day, not going to kill us. We need to be mindful of that, and we need to be respectful that Gaijin employees also have feelings. They are also human. They will have a mental breakdown if they are constantly harassed on the subreddit. We can't be doing this. This is literally the hand that feeds us. Ladies and gentlemen, I think these two issues are worth sticking to. I think we take these issues to Gaijin. We find a way to make it a civil discussion, please. We work out our differences. Perhaps you don't like small maps. That's fine. Perhaps I like small maps. Perhaps, who knows? Whatever your opinion, we can discuss it civilly. We don't have to be apes. We've evolved millions and millions of years. We don't need to be uncivilized. What we need is a good working relationship with Gaijin. And we can only do that if we are both united, if we are both civil, and if we continue to work on our differences. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a real goer here. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.